Welcome to Nicole Chanis hosting 50's AF podcast. Thank you for listening, watching, whatever you're doing. We have a lot of fun in store for today's podcast. So for you viewers and listeners out there, if you recall, one of my initial podcasts was with a man sitting across from me. And we got a lot, and I mean a lot of people saying, where's part 2? When is Alex coming back? And we want Alex's perspective on stuff. So the people have spoken. And guess what? Today's guest is, drumroll, Alex Dinu. Welcome, Alex, back for part 2.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, actually.
Okay.
I actually feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world. I'm sitting in the middle of downtown Boca on a beautiful day with a gorgeous woman having a conversation.
So thank you. Thank
good way
you.
to start.
I got a handsome man across from me that's willing to get on the hot seat and talk about shit. Speaking of which, we're going to start off with something kind of funny. So we always said from the first one, like, oh, let's do a part 2 maybe, without feedback, right?
Right, yep.
Yeah, we just kind of we're like, there's so many things that we could talk about. And I have to dive into, because ever since that first podcast, Alex will reach out to me and be like, look at this text I got from this girl. And I'm just like, what the fuck? I'm like, women. I mean, I know the DMs I'm getting from guys and women about our first podcast, and then be like, even on other podcasts, they would say to me, oh, I wonder what Alex's perspective would be. Like, literally, everybody just draws Alex back into, every podcast and a DM to me. But with Alex, I almost feel guilty, but it's also hilarious. I'm not laughing at your expense. No. But he will send me text messages, that are pretty screwed up from women that he's meeting, because he's single, of course, just like me. And their perspective and perception of Alex and I on the podcast. And how kind of bitchy. I'm sorry. I don't know any other way to say it, but Alex, can you dive in a little bit here just to start off?
Well, I think overall, most of them were pretty positive, actually, but there were certainly ones with, your ad hominems about, my motivation and perspective and all that. But overall, I think it was really positive. I think the different point of views is what really people zeroed in on. Mm-hmm. And I think it's great. And I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversation around that today.
Right. And we will. And we're going to. You have your water. Go for it.
Thank you.
But, it's really interesting. When you have a guest on a podcast, people definitely pick up on an energy, or they think there's an energy. And what I find interesting is when somebody watched us on the podcast or listened to us, usually it was from watching, and they're like, oh, no way you didn't date. Oh, no. And it's why? What gives you, first of all, as a future prospective person that either one of us would date, what gives you the right to go back into our history and say something like, oh, it makes me uncomfortable that the two of you had that chemistry on camera? Were you dating one of us? And we're pretty upfront and honest about the fact that we are friends. We've never gone on a date. And, even when I said to Alex and put him on the spot, the last one said, so do you think we'll ever go out? And he's like, I ain't going out with your ass, but I'll be friends with you, right?
No. What I said was, I love it the way it is. And I don't want to screw it up.
I know. Which, okay, the first subject then, Alex, let's talk about this one. Do you think men and women can be friends? We hear this no matter what your age is, but let's talk about from our road and where we've been in life and where we are today.
I think that you're right. You hear that all the time, that you can't do it. I think I have more of a iconicalistic view on that, in that it happens all the time. You're friends with the bank teller, you're friends with people at the gym, you're friends with what have you, folks on your tennis team, whatever. I think what the fundamental premise there is, though, is if there's some type of an attraction. Oh. And that really is what differentiates it. And people, when they make that comment to me, that's, it's a contradiction on its face, because there's 1,000 examples where they're friends. But then once there's some kind of a physical connection, attraction, that's where the dynamics change. And they usually see them, at least from my experience, three ways. You have one where one person is really into it and the other one isn't, and then they end up, typically one tries to befriend them and think they're going to switch over, what have you. There's ones where you just look at it and say, screw it, go forward with it. And then there's ones where it starts out that way and that chemistry kind of wears off, and then you interact with them differently and you end up having an extremely good friendship. At least that's been my experience. I don't know about you.
Well, do you think, I have somebody that I dated when shit was like really busy for me and I barely had time, and he's a sweetheart and he was supportive. But with that came we just kissed for many months. That's it. I mean, so we never got to an intimate level is what I would say. So do you think if intimacy came into the picture, I know you talk about one liking more than the other, but let's just say, say there was intimacy, and then you both you end on good terms. Can you be friends once you were intimate with each other?
Yes, you can.
You think you can?
I do, yes.
Do you know the majority of people would say no?
I agree. They would say no.
Yeah, they would say, we don't know what we're talking about, right?
I've got several examples to support that.
Well, do you want to give one?
Well, just in general. In general, there's been several women that I started out in some type of a relationship with, and it got personal, physical. In the fullness of time, it didn't really work out that well, but we definitely stayed friends and are friends today.
Yeah, so it can.
It can.
But I think you're right when you talk about if one person still has feelings. Yeah, no, that's not going to work. And
I think you have to take a fairly mature approach to it. I mean, we're adults and,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No,
it's
is.
not like a high school fling.
I wonder, I don't know whether it's women or men that would be more jealous. Would men be more jealous if I was friends with a guy like you versus a woman that is with you dating, uncomfortable and jealous with a friendship with me? I'm going with the women will be more uncomfortable.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And I think some of it's just a lack of trust, or maybe some issue that they have. Excuse me. I think the other one is just that if they feel comfortable, if they feel secure with themselves and right. Trust the person. Right. Yeah.
I think security is the key to it. I mean, if I was, I was in that situation when I met my first boyfriend, that I dated for a long time. And he had mentioned to me there was this one girl that he had dated. And it came out in a way that she was less interested in him, but they were friends. And that was the one person and only request I had. I said, I'm not comfortable with you being friends because you still are alluding to me that you had feelings. Yes. So at what point would I want them to be friends? That's not appropriate in that situation.
It's also puts them in a very tempting environment, which is probably not healthy.
Well, he was good. He didn't, of course. He had his eye on the prize, but he lost the prize. Yeah, we're not going there because he was no prize to me, but, I learned lessons from that. So another topic that we're going to talk about in dating is income disparity. This is something that I don't think we've ever talked about. And Alex and I kind of we're like, ooh, we want to talk about this. And what I mean by that is whether a man or a woman has more means than the other. And, the expectations that come with that. Does that mean that if you have more means, you need to be more self-aware of it? Are you a dick and you're not? Or a bitch in that sense? And, it's not easy to be dating in your 50s and necessarily find somebody that, if you're a woman and you have means, let me say it that way. If you're a woman and you have means, I think it's more difficult, I find, in talking to people, that to find a man that they are not, let me put it this way. The whole gold digger concept, it can go both ways. It
Absolutely.
Can. Right. But it's never talked about gold. Have you ever met a guy that you're like, oh, he's a gold digger? Have you ever come across someone like that?
No.
I have. I think I dated one, actually. Yeah. He had no problem with me opening my wallet tons, and not Yeah. So let's talk about this. Okay. What challenges, Alex, do you see in your viewpoint about, income disparity, how it's handled, and examples of like when a person has not handled it well in a relationship, especially dating in our 50s, 60s when we're approaching like that retirement time. And, so what is your experience or thoughts on that?
I mean, there's been a number of women that I've gone out with that were, extremely wealthy. And
how did you know? Like, how does that come out? I'm kind of curious about that.
So a couple of ways. The most self-evident ones are, their house, their car, their lifestyle, all the various places that they go or belong or what have you. It's generally not that easy or not that difficult to determine that. And these were, significantly wealthy. I think that, from that standpoint, you've got an expectation, and that's probably the biggest part, the most difficult part to handle. It's like, okay, they're living a lifestyle that you're not living. And so the question is really, how do you deal with that? How do you close that gap?
Okay. And
well,
were you ever put in a situation like that and then someone weren't self-aware is the word I would like to
I would say the most extreme example was this conversation one time turned into, with really short notice, we're going to go to the Kentucky Derby, and this thing kind of...
From Florida.
Okay. Yeah, with like 6 days lead time. And by the time the thing spun up, it turned out...
Is this somebody you're dating?
Yes.
Okay.
And by the time the thing spun up, which was very quickly... with just a few folks, it turned out to be like a $25,000 or $30,000 weekend, which was not something that
How much?
$25,000 or $30,000.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and so what did you do?
Well, ultimately, I didn't go.
You were like, peace out. Did you ever have a conversation with that person about that issue? Like about, hey, look, this is your lifestyle. That's great. But, look, you can't expect me, Did you ever have that conversation?
That's exactly what it was. Yep.
Did you find she lost respect or respected you more for being honest?
I think it was a little bit of a wake-up call, because sometimes they're not that aware of some of the actions. They just it's a very different environment. And I think in that particular case, it was like, whoa, okay, I get it. It was a little after the fact.
So she was not self-aware.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Yep. How long after you guys had that conversation did it last?
Maybe 3 months.
Okay.
Not that long.
Okay. Yeah. So that came out. I dated somebody that I would like to say I'm pretty self-aware of things, and I don't come from the mindset that the man has to pay for everything. Right. Period. I don't care how much money you make. I mean, listen, everyone knows I like to be like old-fashioned. Yep. But at the same time, I think it's a matter of respect, ladies. I think at some point when you're dating, I don't mean the first 3 dates, but if you're dating and you're in a relationship, pull out your wallet, your purse, whatever you want to call it. And if you're in a position where you can't afford a lot, just do the little things. Like, learn, be an active listener. Learn what that person likes. Like if they like a certain candy, okay, like have a bowl of candy of their favorite candy waiting for when they come home. It just shows so much thought. And there's so many ways that it doesn't have to be about money. So if I just think women and men need to be self-aware of that and not impose. Oh, here's another one, Alex. How about when women get asked to go to like a gala? Okay, I'm throwing this out there. Do you know how expensive it is for us to just like your hair and makeup, that's $500 there. Boom. Okay. Then you're buying the dress. So like when a man asks a woman to go to a charity event, I don't think they understand that maybe not all women like get all dressed up, but the majority, especially in East Boca during the season. Would you agree? Like, yeah.
Well, I can tell you that you've had a big impact on me on that. So I have I have a much greater appreciation and much more awareness of that whole perspective. So yes.
You're talking about when I schooled you. I didn't school you, but
you gave me a very different point of view, and I appreciate it, and I learned from it. Yeah.
But to my point is, if a woman, like for example, is asking a man to a black tie event, That's $500 a pop almost to rent if they don't own a tuxedo.
Yep.
Right? So it's like these little subtle things that I think both parties need to be more self-aware if there is an income disparity. And I think it goes both ways. It's not just, a matter of the man always has more money, because it could be the woman. And I know when I was in a position and, I wanted somebody to come along for the ride and they didn't have the means. Okay. Well, I paid for that first class ticket. I upgraded. I did whatever it is, because you just need to be a little more self-aware. Now, don't get any ideas, guys. Dating Nicole does not mean she's taking you for a free ride anywhere. So, only Alex gets that free ride. So, do we think that a relationship can be healthy with income disparity, or do you think it's always going to be a little bit of an issue?
No, I think if you can work it out and find some common ground, it should work out great. I think the example that you were using, and I know a little bit more of the background in that, it was perfectly acceptable, and I think scalable way to do it.
Yeah, I think so. But at the end of the day, when I look back on it, I don't look back on it fondly, though, because had that person, I'll give you an example. I put that person in a place where they were able to obtain a substantial amount of business because, I had put that person in the location, staying for a while. And because I was a girlfriend, I didn't even get a thank you. I didn't get a fucking bottle of wine, nothing. Now, I know that person, and if anyone else had given that person the opportunity, they would have been taken out to a nice restaurant, a nice this. And it's like, you need to be aware, if you get opportunities off the opportunities that somebody presents you.
I think that is completely inappropriate. They should have taken care of you greater than, I think, if it was a stranger that made some introductions, because, business is business, and it was I suspect a significant amount of business.
It was a very, very large dollar.
And I don't get that. I don't understand it. I have another perfect example. I have a friend of mine who's extremely well off, and he had a very long-term relationship with a woman who's a good friend of mine. They were selling his house, and she did all the work, and she basically wanted to be comped like a regular real estate agent, and he cut the thing in half. And it's like, you got to be kidding. Like, why?
Which way, when you say why? Like, he shouldn't given up any, or she deserved?
Yeah, she did a great job. She did certainly more effort and put more focus on it than a third party would do.
Yeah.
And I would, I think that you would actually overcompensate that just to show your appreciation.
Yes.
I was blown away, especially because this guy's a fairly serious guy.
Yeah.
And I don't get it.
Did they work out, or didn't work out. See, that's not dealing with the income disparity or acknowledging and appreciating. Just because you're dating somebody and they do something for you, you need to treat it no differently than you would that if somebody that was in business gave you that opportunity. Absolutely. I'm not talking about like you have to every minute of the day thank each other, but I think in that example you gave, I think in the example I gave, like, don't take each other for granted. That's what it is.
There you go.
So that brings us to a subject that we want to talk about, and that is, I talk about on the podcast that, there's different mournings. There's mourning from a divorce. There's mourning from being a widow. And then there's mourning from relationships. And I often speak on the topic of it's really actually harder as we get older when you're dating. And then there's like a breakup anywhere from 6 months, 2 years or more, because you're that further away from, holy shit, I'm older. And I thought I'd be with somebody walking my journey in life, and now I got to start all over again. And part of that comes with the hurt. And, and how do you recover from that hurt to move on? Because it's like you're going, well, if I wait too long, I'm losing time. But if I do it right away and you have a healthy mindset about it, let's face it, it's going to be a rebound because you haven't recovered. Yeah. What do you think about it? I think it's just harder to be like end a relationship and move on in our 50s.
It's definitely harder as you get older. It's harder to find that connection, and it's harder to lose it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, like, have you ever been in a situation where it's like it hit you hard, the breakup, and, you had to like sit with that emotion and linger with it?
Yeah, actually, unfortunately, I had that happen twice. Over the course of my life, there was two gals that I just, they checked all the boxes. They were amazing. They're smart. They're beautiful. They're just well-rounded. And the first one, I think it was the timing was off. I think she was just not quite in a place where she needed to. She had a lot of issues with one of her kids, but she was a wonderful person. And she used to always downplay when I would call that out. And
what do you mean downplay?
Like I would, make comments about how great I thought she was, and she would always tamp those down.
Why do you think that is?
I think she wasn't where she needed to be, I would say, in retrospect, especially in retrospect. But the good news is she was also very close to my son and his girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife. And a number of years later, I had a reason at a fairly significant medical situation, and I felt compelled to talk to her. And I had reached out to her after a number of years and just asked for a few minutes to talk, and it ended up being like an hour. And eventually we kind of just struck up a conversation. And when I went back to Boston, because she was up in Boston, we went out to dinner. And what was the most amazing part of it was when I saw her this time, that everything was in place. I mean, she looked beautiful. She had such a purpose in her life. She had all kinds of projects that she was working on. There was just this radiating joy and happiness. She had been, I think she said at that point, like a 4-year relationship. And it was great. And I was just, I finally got to see this living embodiment of what I always felt was there. You
saw it in her.
I saw it live after that, and I thought it was great. And I was super appreciative getting a chance to see her, and the fact that I was able to, maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
The other one, the second one, not so. Again, checked all the boxes. This particular time, though, that was around probably times when you need to have an adult conversation, and it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And this thing kind of spun out of control fairly quickly, and I tried, for a number of times to repair it, to get back. And I mean, I saw this side that was just this ice woman, no matter what. And
not originally, but like,
yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, I was, very contrite. I was hurting, and I really wanted, and just, she wouldn't bend. Now, the other thing is, and not that you would count other people's opinion, but certainly people that are close to you that know you, mm-hmm. All my friends loved the first one. They absolutely loved her, and a very large percentage of them didn't like the other one. And I only say that because these are people that know you, their vested interest in you, and that's what their focus is. And sometimes you have to listen to that too. And I probably didn't listen to that as well in the second one.
Interesting. That's an interesting point. Like, how much do we listen to our friends about what's best for us? I mean, honestly, thank you for sharing that, those stories with us and being vulnerable about that. And it shows that the hurt can go both ways, women and men, I just think it cuts at a different, deeper level as you get older. I just think it does. And I'm not saying the hurt, my daughter, I remember her first boyfriend in second grade, that was real, and she's crying and throwing shit across the room, but we're talking about everything that comes with falling in love or being in love and recovering. And, I believe, Alex, do you believe there's more than one love in your life opportunity?
Yes, there definitely is. And I think there's different types. And if I look at the relationship with my wife, it was very good for 90% of the time that I was married, but it was very different. And I think one of the reasons was everything happened really quickly. I knew her many years before I met her randomly, and then it was meet her, 6 months later you're engaged, 6 months later you're married, and 9 months later you have a child. Compared to one of the things I really like about both of my sons is they spent years with their, quote, girlfriends before they became their wives. And so they had this much broader experience. And I think from when I was married, that was in the context of married and kids, et cetera. compared to, say, for example, the last two that I was describing, they were very different. I was, much more impacted from both of the two ones that I just mentioned than I was when I got divorced. And I'm talking like orders of magnitude, especially the second one. The second one, it took me a really, really long time. And in fact, I've got one of the best pictures ever over by Louis Bossi's, and every time I drive by it, like, still pulls at my heart a little bit.
That's sweet.
It was, yeah. But
I mean,
they were
not
very
that
different.
Your pain is sweet. I'm just saying it's a sweet gesture.
But they were very different types of love. Yeah.
Yeah. My ex-husband, my first husband, we met and were engaged within 6 weeks and married in 6 months. And I had just turned 25, and I had those parents that I did whatever they said. And unfortunately, my mother kind of raised me with, a man should love you more. So I honestly wasn't feeling it, when I met him. I mean, but I didn't understand. I didn't understand what love was. I didn't. And therefore it didn't work out because we were just two different people. And then when I had the opportunity to meet my late husband, it was like a lightning bolt just hit me, because I also was older and more mature, and I had already had my success in being independent. I was older, and it was a little more confidence and, understanding about what the right balance in a relationship, at least for me, should be. Yep. Everybody's a little different. But, that raises a point of... So you talk about those two loves, right?
Yep.
For me, I honestly think my late husband, I think that was my only love in my past when I really think about it. And, with my situation, I had the unfortunate opportunity to plan for years for his demise. And he most certainly was like, "You're young, I want you to move on." And I was like, "I don't even want to talk about it, because who am I going to love more?" is the way I felt about it. Yeah. So, do you think these past loves, the hurt that we endured and that we still carry, does it hinder from moving on and finding future loves? Like, does that person become, or those two ladies in your example, become the bar? And like, if a woman doesn't reach exactly and check every box that those two women, that you're always, do you find yourself always comparing future, even first dates or second dates or any women to those two women and the way they made you feel?
Well, first of all, I just want to circle back on what you said, and I want to publicly acknowledge that I find a lot of inspiration as to learning about when you lost your husband and how strong you've been has always really impacted me a lot. And I know you've, hold my feet to the fire on a couple of these, and I look back and I'm like, wait a minute, she had it way worse than I did.
Well, what do you mean? Like, why are you
because
comparing?
You're in your situation, there's a finality of this. Like, he's dead, he's gone.
Yeah.
And, I've just seen you cover the subject, talk about it, and I just admire how strong you are. And I draw strength from that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, as far as the second part of your question, do you have the bar? Yes, of course. But, I think you should probably look at it a different way, at least what I try and do, and is that you've been able to have that type of relationship, that you can feel those feelings for somebody again. And that's, I think, the most positive things. Now, obviously, there's things that you learn that you don't want to repeat, but I always found it incredibly positive and encouraging that you could get back to that point. Yeah, so.
I don't know that, I think it's more or less like in life, we evolve and we grow. And when we stop evolving and growing, who are we? I mean, like, honestly, until you die, I think you should yearn and desire and reach for growth and self-awareness and growing. And I'll use my son, for example. He met his now fiance, who I absolutely adore. He was a baby. He was 18. And they weathered the storm at 26 and a half. Here he is. He got engaged. And you know what? we can all say there's a big difference between 18 and 26.
Absolutely.
So when you're, and I think in a marriage or any relationship, I think there's different chapters. And I think that's why so many divorces happen, is because we do evolve and have chapters in our life, especially if you had kids. And once they've gone away, you have to look at each other and go, are we the same people? Do we see the world the same anymore? And, I think that's a lot of times why there are divorces, because all of a sudden they land and like, we've been together 30 years. I'm different. You're different. Like, where are we going with this? In terms of being strong, and I appreciate your comment on that. Listen, I have my moments. Strength is maybe what I put out there, but if anyone were to really sit down and talk to me, I'll probably be crying in like 5 minutes, about it. So, it's a strength that you have to draw on and move on from, but I appreciate it. And again, like everything I do is I just want other women to realize like, hey, I did a bedroom confessional about widow to widows, and I kept it honest the day after my anniversary, what would have been my anniversary. And it was the first time I didn't fall apart crying. And, it was like, you just have no choice. You have to move on, And that's why I think there's different loves in our life. I mean, you can have multiple loves because you evolve. And that's the beauty of that, is that you can. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate, you sharing yours. So you think now that you can successfully see future women and take them for who they are and who Alex is today. Because sometimes I also think people glamorize the past. Like
that's
they forget that,
true.
Right? So they might go, oh my God, that was a wonderful relationship, but they forgot about, oh yeah, that fight, that thing, right?
I guess I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or what have you, but I think that there's part of human nature that to do that. You look back and you kind of idolize certain parts and forget about other parts. And
it does happen, doesn't it?
It's something that you need to be aware of and stay grounded on it for sure.
Yeah. I think in everything, look, we know Alex called me out for sure. That's how we kind of wound up at these podcasts, And, I think you always have to be more self-aware. And I think people are too quick to point the finger at the other people and not point the finger at themselves and say, what can I take away from this and learn to be a better person out there dating and in a relationship? And you got to do the work. I mean, if you want to have a healthier relationship and a person in your journey, you have to be willing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I try, and as much as it was difficult for me, I certainly took away a lot of lessons, and I think, made the necessary improvements as a result, but it is clearly painful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, pain is real. And what you're hearing is Alex just acknowledging just as much as women, men go through that hurt too. And so women, you got to remember that, just keep that in mind. We're going to get to that in a minute. So Alex, I told you that I bring this up, and I've always wanted to know a guy's, impression on this. And you know me, like I'm an alpha female, but, men.
No argument that so far.
It's a challenge, though. It is a challenge being an alpha female, because just because I have my shit together and direction and a sense of purpose, why do I have to be like labeled? Why do I have to be looked at as a challenge? Meaning that like, oh, she's going to be a handful because she's an alpha, when like, in your perspective, when you've met a woman that basically has her shit together, now there's a difference between being an alpha that's confident and an alpha that's a bitch and cocky.
You stole one. Yes, I agree with that 1,000%.
Right?
Yes, definitely.
Right. And, just to step back for a second, the first person I dated for a long time after my late husband, I was a broken person. I was not the person I am today at all. And, I think that journey and talking about learning from, past relationships, you have to be able to sit there and go, okay, what was my part that I did wrong? And in that relationship, I was a shell of myself. Everything revolved around him. I had no purpose. It was literally like, when you're coming home, I was probably the most fucking annoying, yet good girlfriend. I'm not going to say I wasn't, but I think that, any relationship has to have, I would think a man would want a woman with purpose, but why is it then that, like, I hear some men say, I'll never date an alpha? Like, what's your experience been on that?
My experience is the opposite of that. I can't speak for the guys that feel that way. I have to imagine that they feel some way, shape, or form intimidated or less valuable or whatever. But from my viewpoint, I find that incredibly positive. I think it's something that you should acknowledge, and I value that tremendously. Mm-hmm. It's something that, they're, like you said, they have a purpose in their life. They're smart. They make their own decisions, and they can move forward with their life. I think all those virtues are hugely desirable, and I don't know why anyone would have a problem with that. So I'm at the other end of that spectrum. I have nothing but respect and admiration for that.
What I've heard is
with the caveat that you said, where they start bitching about stuff or they're in your face, but it's very different. The ones that are truly what we're talking about don't do that. So that's actually, not even a relevant comment.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, there are some that are just like, can't give up the reins. Right. And that's a difference, like in a man, I want to give up the reins in every way. In life, in the bedroom, I don't want to be alpha. I don't want to. And, it also switches, Alex. Do you know a lot of successful men? Okay, I'm just going to go there a little bit with you. I know I'm going to make you blush. Okay, do you know a lot of successful men, like, you hear about like these successful men that go see dominatrix, right? Yes. They want to be submissive. And you want to know why?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're going to tell me.
Because all their life they're in control. They're control. So they actually have to pay somebody to treat them like shit and put them down, because these men, there are men out there that are like, I want a point in my day, my week, my month, whatever it is, where somebody else is just bossing me around and doing a little spanking. I don't know what it is, but, don't come my way, because I ain't doing that shit. Okay, I'm just going to say that, not at all. And, I totally want to segue now to the next subject. Are we ready to go to the next one?
You're the boss. Okay. Whatever you want.
No, it's a two-way street. So here's a really interesting thing that I thought of the other day, and I myself do this. I'm always saying the men need to raise their bar, bring your A game, and, come on, man, da-da-da-da-da. And, then we talk about men, whether men in their 60s, let's just say hypothetically 60s, can they change? Can they really, or are they stuck in their way? And there are so many people, Alex, I think, that see it one way or the other. They say, oh, if you sweeten the deal, a man can change. And then the majority of people, the majority of women that I talk to are like, no, that person's not changing. They are who they are, and they're set in their ways. And this concept, I hate the word training a man. I call it, right? Isn't that disrespectful when people say that?
Yeah.
I know. So, like, I like to just say being bendable in a relationship. But here's the thing. I've never flipped it around and said, women, where's the accountability in us changing? It's always, on my podcast, I'm always calling out men. And I realized that, and I caught myself, and I'm like, Alex, I want to talk about this. Like, have you ever like met somebody and been like, I like her. I would just like to see her change a little bit this way. Will she change in her late 50s? Or like, walk me down a guy's perspective on that. And guys' discussion. I mean, I'm sure guys talk about it to you. Like, share with us.
Well, I think an overarching theme there is that the person has to desire to do that. And in my particular case, I've made over the years enormous number of changes positively. And yes, when you're with someone, you'd like to believe that they would be open to feedback and work on it, but it does require them to focus and have a desire to do it. But if you can, and you do have that, it'll happen. I mean, I'm definitely a good example of that. And I got rid of some pretty bad behaviors.
We're talking about the women. We're referring to the women.
Yeah. Well,
like, have you ever experienced like dating a woman going, well, this, that, and this bother me. I'm going to try and change her, just like the way I'm talking about men. I'm curious if men ever look at women that way.
Yes. I mean, I have, yes.
And were they able to change?
I would say one of them did for sure. And the other 2 times it came up, I would say marginal at best case. So
you think it's kind of like equal, basically?
Yeah.
It's just the same. It's a wash. I would like to think, in my opinion, and I don't know the statistics on this at all, I think women stand, I don't know. I don't know whether I think women stand firmer in the sand or do men. I don't know. As you get older, or I don't know which one
I'm sure
it is.
the guys are subjected to the desire to change more than women, but I don't have any.
Is that because they want to get in bed with her kind of thing is what you're saying?
No, it just feels like, that comment, which you open up the whole subject about is typically directed at the male. So
it is. And that's when I thought about it. I'm like, how wrong of me, Nicole, to never say, women, bring your A game. Women, be bendable. I don't like the word trainable. I hate that. And it's just rude. It's like you're a horse or a dog. Like, don't refer to a human being as being, trainable, which kind of brings me to the next subject. And you're the one that really came up with this one. And it's etiquette in dating. And, I want you to elaborate on, one thing first. I'm going to tell you, because you wanted to talk about the etiquette of dating. So I looked up the word etiquette, okay? So the word etiquette in a definition is the customary code of polite behavior in society or among members of a particular profession or group. Okay. So now let's apply that to dating. Now, do we do that in dating? I know this is a thing for you. So this is all you, Alex. Go.
No, I mean, I think it is. I think if you start at the core, so many people, the premise of the show, right? It's a shit show when you're trying to do this, to use your term. But I think it starts with the person. And if there's so many different things that can be done that don't take a whole lot of effort to show respect to another person, be polite to another person, basically, exhibit manners that you should have learned when you were 12 years old or what have you, right? And that starts the whole avalanche, if you will. Yeah. And it's an unfortunate thing. And of course, it's easier to do today because everything can be done so quickly. Somebody can be blocked instantly, or they can be ghosted immediately, or whatever. And so the environment, the tools probably exacerbate the problem. But at the end of the day, people should know what's right and what's wrong and what's polite and what's rude. And to the extent that you can eliminate the rude behavior, I think it would go a long way. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen as often as it should, and I wish it would.
Yeah, it's about basic humanity. Wouldn't you say it's like just being a good human? And if you're a good human in life and, you do charitable things, you go to church, synagogue, whatever, and, believe in God and believe in being kind, it should apply to the dating world too. Like this whole ghosting concept.
That's the worst one.
I don't get, okay, why does a 50-plus-year-old person, men or women, ghost? I can understand if somebody's coming across really difficult and you need to block them, okay?
Yep.
But I don't understand, hello, what are we, 12? It makes no sense to me. You pick up the phone after a first date and you say, thank you very much. Or even at the end of the date. And I've done this before and said, you know what? I just want to be clear and transparent. I enjoyed the time with you, but I just don't see us aligning. I like the word aligning. Perfect. That's my thing.
Perfect.
Right? Isn't that a nice way to say aligning? I'm not putting you down. I'm not leaving it up for discussion. I'm not being rude. And I'm not calling out, what about you I don't like. I feel like when you say I don't see us aligning, there's no coming back from that. There's no one that can say
yep.
Somebody might say what do you mean? All right. But I think when you say aligned, they'll pretty much realize that door's shut. It doesn't take a lot to have humanity.
Right.
And, you need to look at yourself in the mirror on the wall and go am I being a good person in the dating pool just as I am in life? Right? I think is what you're basically saying.
Right. And just that example that you gave, which was like a 20-second response or a 20-second text message, goes a really long way. I just think that the whole ghosting thing is super disrespectful, especially if there's some effort put towards it. You're right. And I'm not talking about the fringe elements here. I'm talking about, somebody initiated a discussion with you, got to the point where you went out once or twice or whatever. I don't understand the justification for that. If you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. There's no crime in that. But I think when you do it, when you don't express yourself, then it's really tough on the other person, because then they start getting in their head, like what I did or what I should have done or why didn't I do this, and then you have no mechanism or no feedback to try and correct course on that, and it's really it's not necessary, and it's flat out rude. I mean, and I can give you literally dozens of examples of that, which is unfortunately
that's a whole nother podcast, right?
Yeah, it's prevalent is the point I'm trying to make. So unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, people, just come on, grow up. Let's just keep it kind and caring. And as always, we're almost running out of time. So I do have one more thing that we're going to talk about. And Alex said this, and I think this statement is pretty strong. How do you know if you've ever been in love? What is that definition? I mean, obviously the definition of love is different for everybody. But, I know you have a thought on this. Like, how do you ever know that you truly were in love?
Well, I think the first thing is it's your response to the person's values, right? What exactly are they all made, their integrity, their honesty, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, there's a physical component to it, which is what most people associate it with. I
mean, love and the physical?
I mean, there's an attraction, obviously. That's pretty much a prerequisite at that point. But I think it's beyond that is really where you get to the values are aligned, and you can really get, the term I like to use is, your souls and your heart melt together.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I got hit by Cupid's arrow. Yeah.
Are we going to elaborate on that?
No, I'm not going to elaborate. You know, and I listen, I can feed into that perspective that you just said that, I just think when it's a special date or dates, it's different. I mean, just like, it really is different, and you really feel it when it's good.
Right.
I mean, there's no way to describe it. It's just like
it's the greatest feeling between two human beings.
It's the fucking greatest shit.
Period.
Yeah, it really is. Especially if you haven't had it in like many years, like me, and like you definitely stumble across. You're dating, and you look at the first date. Yeah, can I live with this? There's always some kind of, I feel like there's always some kind of compromise, like off of your list in some way.
Well, I'm sure there is. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we have to. Nobody's going to be perfect.
Right.
Nobody was built for Alex, and nobody was built for Nicole, but, I think that when you feel it, I'm not saying that I'm in love. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, I'm not saying whether I am or not.
I might say she sounds like she might be getting on the cusp, but I don't know. We'll see.
Don't call me out like that. I don't talk about my personal shit, right? But, as always, you see me flip over, that means we're out of time. And, plus, if I was still dating somebody, that means that you and I would never have that date.
No, well, that's true. So we have to.
I know.
We'll have to see how that goes.
I know, right? And hopefully you'll get better text messages and calls from women about this podcast, and not be like, oh, I don't believe you two. You definitely were dating, which I just think is freaking hilarious. That's a whole nother discussion. But Alex, everybody loves having you on. They love your viewpoints, and you're smart as a tack. I mean, you are just. You're like into philosophy. So Alex brings always this strong perspective to everything. And I think that's what people relate to with you. So thank you for doing part 2. I really appreciate everything as always. And you're always very special to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on. I love doing it. I'm happy to help in any way I can. I think you got a great idea and things really building, and thank you very much for letting me be part of it.
Thank you. And
Okay.
yeah, this shit's going fast, man. I have to remind myself I've only been doing this 2 months because sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't get enough likes. I didn't get enough views. Okay, girl, just keep doing what you're doing and helping people and enjoy it.
For sure. No question about it.
It's kind of weird. All right, guys, this is Nicole Chanis, 50's AF podcast. Tune in, watch, subscribe on your YouTube channel so you always get an alert or where you're listening. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you. I love you.
Love you too. Peace out, guys.